So, the way that I read the interpretation of marriage in the Bible is that um, the reason why, first of all, somebody has to be the submittee. Because if I, if me and you go to confront someone, okay,
Mm-hmm.
if you go to confront someone and
Ugh.
you get into, you question something that, so we go to, say we go to a business meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and I say I want something done from the person, and then you question me, and you say, well, why shouldn't we do this? And then now, because you've said that, you have now given the person on the other side of the table something to play off of. So now they can sit there and say, oh, well, yeah, right, you should do that. And so now they have the ability to drive a wedge between you two because you spoke it into action.
This kind of goes along with that social media thing you were talking about yesterday. Huh?
Yeah. So you gave them a way to drive a wedge by you speaking up against me in a public setting. Somebody has to just be the unquestioned follow and play along, uh, and then you discuss. If you had an issue with it, you discuss it in private because you're a team. Because if you throw your issues out to the public, everybody's going to know how to get in and drive a wedge between y'all's goals, or between you two. So I'm trying to think of something more concrete, like an actual thing. So say,
Oh my God.
say for instance, like your kid's getting a shot or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell the doctor we're not going to get the shot, and the doctor thinks you're cute, and I'm trying to get the most simplest thing I can,
Okay.
and I say, well, we're not getting a shot, and you say, oh, what are you talking about? We need to get this shot, blah, 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 blah. And then the doctor agrees with you, like, oh, yeah, your wife's right. Like, you should get this shot. And then, say, afterwards, now he goes to you and says, well, I think that's kind of messed up that your husband wouldn't want to get the shot for your kid. Does he not put your kid first and everything? And then
That's what he wants me
and
to.
then you end up sleeping with the doctor, and then he ends up dipping town anyways, and then
Hold
you
on.
left your husband for
Time out.
him
How did I end up sleeping with the doctor?
because he starts to say to you stuff like, oh, well, I can't believe that he wouldn't want to put your son's health first, and because he knows
Oh
that
my
you
God.
wanted your son to get the
Sleeping.
shots,
Oh,
so he knows how to play on your side now because you let him know that you had a side and your husband didn't agree with you. So now he plays on your side and says, hey, I'm on your team. Like, and your husband obviously isn't on your team. And so, we connect better. And then you end up sleeping with the guy. And then he ends up not actually loving you. And he just wanted to get in your pants. And he dips town and leaves you. And you left your husband for him. It's the same thing when, like, whenever they say, like, oh, well, I left the guy I was with for 5 years because I wanted to go to this musician and Los Angeles. He told me, oh, LA's great. Come and live out here. And you go, and then turns out that person didn't actually love you. They just wanted you around for that time being. And because you spoke things into existence, you let them know what they can use to get on your level and uh, make you feel welcomed to them. Like just very small, it doesn't matter how small of a thing that you can say, but like you could say the most smallest of things and people can use those to try to level with you and try to make you feel comfortable in coming to them and making them feel like they're on your side. That's the whole basis of manipulating people. So it could, you might think oh, well, it's not a big deal for me to say to my husband, oh, why are you giving him $20? You should give him $40. Or why are you giving him 40? You should give him 20. It does not matter how small and minor you think it is. Any kind of indication of non-agreement with your spouse in a public setting gives people access on how to manipulate you into thinking that, oh, hey, I'm more on your side than your own husband is. And I mean, it can be absolutely anything, something so minute, because that's how you drive someone's emotions. You fuel the flames. And so, back to my shot reference, it's like now the doctor can sit there and say, oh, okay, well, he just doesn't care about the well-being of your son the same way you do. Why would you be with somebody like that? Like, I wouldn't do that. Maybe you should leave now. We're going into maybe what about, like, don't you think that I would be better to take care of kids with you? And then, because I'm like, well, I would get my kid the shots. And then now you leave your husband and for somebody that you don't even know if is actually on your side because they're sitting there trying to manipulate you into an action yourself. If that person actually loved you, should they not say, hey, I want to be with you. This is what I think. This is how I would do things. If you would like to leave your husband for me, you're more than welcome to. But he's not doing that in this scenario. In this scenario, they are trying to influence you into leaving your husband. And that's how you know they're lying in their intentions. If somebody's intentions are good, they shouldn't have to influence you to do it. If somebody loves you, they shouldn't have to influence you to do something. Because the whole basis of love is having a higher mind and a higher concept of things, thinking above the emotions, making the conscious decision yourself. It's how I say that, like, people are so focused on reacting instead of acting. If you love someone, you should want them to act. You shouldn't want them to react to something that you're saying or telling them. And so the concept of marriage, it's not a sexist thing to say that one side has to submit to the other, because the whole point is to not give people holes in your relationship for them to exploit. And you think that you're not giving people holes. You're like, oh, well, that's something that's not big of a deal. But I guarantee you, if you don't think, I guarantee you, anybody could send me an email on something. Well, what about this? Where's the hole if my wife disagrees with me on this in a public setting? And I can give you a scenario to where I could find a hole in that and give something that somebody could say to try to break your family apart. And with that being said, so the woman in the Bible is chosen, and some societies are different. Some societies will say the man is the submissive person. But we have found that it is more man dominated. But the point is,
everybody's upset that I quit my job.
Okay, that's anyways. So when you have, so that's the purpose of the submission thing, and not speaking against your partner in a public setting, because the whole point is not to give people a way to figure out how to divide.
Relationship.
No, it's not about what's going on in a relationship. It's like you don't want to give someone a thought on how they could divide you and your spouse.
Okay.
So anytime that you speak a disagreement to someone you do not know, you give them an opportunity and a way to think something through in their head to start wedging a divide between you two based on that issue that you spoke against on your spouse in the public setting. So that's why, and it also says, to go pray in your closet and stuff. And because the whole concept is that the devil can't hear your thoughts, because a human being can't hear your thoughts. As soon as you speak it into the existence, that's when it becomes the problem. So that's why it says go pray in your closet. Go, don't, women submit unto your husbands, and don't speak out against them. And if you have a problem with something to do, you wait until you're at home and you say it to them in private. You discuss your issues in private. So that way other people can't use them to wedge a divide between you. And that's where a lot of people have mess ups in their relationships. So yeah, just unfortunately for most religions, the women are chosen as and that's because they bear children, and so they're more looked at as a pathos type person. They're more emotional, is what they say, because they're the child bearers, and so your whole thing is caretaking, if that's in the case of that. So that's not to say that women can't be leaders. It's the fact that, at least from my adaptations and interpretations of the Bible, is that women should uh, should only be leaders when they're needed. And so, for instance, like when you look at Paul's letters, when Paul writes to the Romans, he sends them a woman. But if you look at Rome at the time, they stabbed Julius Caesar in the back in the close to the first century. Then Augustus Caesar takes over. They have so much political turmoil that's going on in the Roman Empire, and it's like everybody's plotting, everybody's logically thinking. There's so much plotting going on and everything, that the whole purpose of sending a woman, from what I can understand, is that we're sending you a woman to give you some pathos, because y'all have too much logos going on that y'all aren't even considering the emotional damage that you're inflicting upon the people, because you're so concerned with what is logically correct, what's gonna make the Roman Empire thrive. You're so focused on how to make the Roman Empire thrive that you don't care about anything from an emotional complexity point. You're ruining people's lives and not even caring, because you're just like, what's going to make the Roman Empire stand? So he sends them a woman. And then you look at the Church of Ephesians, and he tells the Ephesians, why do y'all suffer under a woman's teachings? But then he just sent a woman to teach the Romans, because it wasn't he wasn't saying that, oh, women shouldn't teach, saying that men should step up and lead. And when you falter, in the same way that in a marriage, that your wife is there in private to say, hey, I don't think this was correct for you to do, because it says that like the men are supposed to be the leaders, so you're supposed to make the best decisions to get y'all to the top of the mountain. And if you have a problem with something that's done, and you go to the same way that a wife goes to their husband and says, hey, I don't think that this is the correct thing to do, and here's why I think that it's bad. I think what you're doing is bad. So say your husband starts robbing people. You can tell him, well, I don't think it's right that you're stealing from people. I understand and I appreciate what you're trying to do for us, but I don't think this is the right way to go about it. And it's the same way that he told the Ephesians, like, why are y'all sitting and letting women do all these leadership roles when you're supposed to be stepping up and doing it yourselves? But then at the same instance, Rome had men leaders. They were just really brutal, shitty leaders who didn't care about the people they were affecting. They just cared about getting to the top of the mountain. And that was the whole point of then sending a woman to them. It's like, hey, I understand y'all are trying to get to the top of the mountain, but there's a better way to do this, instead of just killing each other and plotting behind each other's backs and all this stuff. This is totally two different cultural contexts that people took out and separated because of the time period. You didn't have a computer where you could just look up and say, oh, well, what's Paul been writing to the Romans about? Like, you actually had to go and discuss that with Paul, or Paul had to write you a letter to tell you the full context of what he meant. Because I think I wrote in one of the verses, it said, I had it in my essay that I wrote. I gotta look that up. Um, he took two. So verses that, and he does this a lot. So I said, Matthew 19:19, and I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery, and whose marrieth her, which is put away, doeth commit adultery. So that the only justification for divorce is adultery. But then he takes that same idea, it's hit on in Luke, of the prodigal son, it permits the son to leave home, make his own choices, and eventually return on his own will. Among other things, the fable emphasizes the Christian conviction in respecting each individual's ability to make their own spiritual choices, including the decision to turn away or towards God. And I said, looking at the dynamic history of early Christianity, showing it how it evolved from a movement orientated on personal spiritual experiences and intimate house church settings that actually that's not even the part that I was talking about. But you still have to, the point was that he used that the prodigal son goes along with marriage as well, because it's like, even if you there's another verse that I have to add into this to make this make sense. Oh, I messed up. I didn't put what where that came from. So Paul gives advice to Christians who are married to non-believers in this passage. And I don't know what passage it was because I messed up in my essay and didn't put where this came from. But apparently it's chapter 7 of somewhere in the Bible, 7:12-16 in the King James Version. If your non-believing partner agrees to continue living together, he urges them to stay in the marriage. The sanctity effect of a believing spouse on an unbelieving partner and their children is emphasized by Paul. God and everything, but my spouse doesn't. I'm following in that I should only leave you for adultery, but also I'm giving you your free will. I'm not at fault if a non-believer decides to leave like the prodigal son does. And that's the whole point of respecting people's free will and also living in the context of being a Christian. And so, I mean, you see interplays like that in all sorts of ways. But the problem is that people took Paul's letters and they'll say, oh, well, on like they'll use the verse in Timothy and they'll say, oh, well, this is sexist because he, I'm going to pull the verse. I got to pull the verse because I don't know what it says. Or I don't know what it says exactly. First Timothy 2:11-12. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission, and I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. Trying to pull up the other verses that I had to go also with this.
in the 1 Corinthians 14:34, women should remain silent in churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church. And then Ephesians, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Titus says, likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the word of God. It's all just a systematic structure on how to keep a family together. So if you want to be a follower of God, you submit. The way it goes is you submit unto God and unto Christ as a male, in the same way that a wife submits unto a husband. That's what it says. So that way you cannot be wedged apart, because the whole point of a marriage is to create a family and bind yourselves together and work as a team. Well, how can you work as a team if there's no leader? How well does teamwork go when you have two leaders? If you have a team of two and they're both leaders,
it's not going to go very well.
And because no individual human being is going to 100% agree with every single thing that another human being says. So you could drive a wedge in anybody's marriage because nobody's going to agree on everything.
Right.
The question is, can you allow them to do it? And that's what all of this stuff is studying. And that's the whole basis of it. So could you rework it into something else today? Yeah, you could. But the problem with that, problem that people have always used, which it doesn't really make any sense to use anymore, is they're like, well, lions, tigers, and bears, if everything goes to crap and you have to live in the woods again, you're going to want a man to protect you. I'm just going to be really, we would have to freaking have one hell of a crazy war to go back to that, because nowadays they're like, oh, well, these feminine men, blah, 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 they're not going to protect you, all this stuff. And they're like, Habib's crew from Pakistan could come take over this country. No, the fuck they can't. If you honestly think that somebody is just going to get a militia and come over and invade the United States, and we're not going to have people to fight. Now, if this was the Roman Empire that fell thousands years ago, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, or how I'm roundabout in that, it's more like 1,800 years ago, somewhere around roughly. Anyway, so yeah, societies get to a point where everything's so easy that you don't have warriors anymore. We get that. But we live in a time period now, unlike any other ones, where no one is going overseas to fight in the same way that we used to. They're just going to send a drone. So sure, you may have more feminine men today, but guess what? If shit hits the fan, they're going to send a drone to fight for them. Okay? You're not going to have some super smart, like Elon Musk, for instance, and these and like all these other people that are contractors for stuff. Have you seen them? Literally, I would say a 15-year-old kid could beat up some of these multi-billionaires that are in this war contracting business. Like, they're not intimidating people. But guess what? If when somebody messes with the United States, you know what they do? They just go blow them up. Like, I mean, what? So to sit here and say like, oh well, we have to stick to this old ways because men are stronger than women. Doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter who's stronger. You literally have so much technology these days. You better like so to sit there and live off of that, like to live off of the old times like that, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Anyways, because half of the stuff isn't even true anymore. Sure, are men biologically more stronger than women? Yes, but guess what? A woman could be a freaking engineer and engineer a drone to. If a woman really had a problem with a man, she could make an assassin drone in these days and times to go kill you. She don't even have to do it herself. So to sit there and say that like you could have a women's society today make so much technology and just take over the world. And then what are your strong men going to do? They're going to die because what are they going to do? Take on an assassin drone? They're out here. Oh, you got to hit the gym and you got to do this because you got to be able to take on a bear. Buddy, dude, bears are on the ground. Okay, an assassin drone's in the air, does a facial scan on you, and it shoots a freaking missile. I don't care how many push-ups, pull-ups, and squats you can do a day. When a freaking RPG comes at you, an RPG comes at you. I don't know what world you're living in, and if you think lifting weights is gonna stop that. And so like we don't live in a society where we've peaked and now we don't have warriors because life is so easy that somebody's going to come in and invade us. If somebody comes in and invade us, I promise you we're just going to blow them up. Like that's it. We're going to shoot them and we're going to blow them up. You don't need warriors like you did back in the day. Now you just need people that can press a red button and put in some coordinates. Like you live in this is 5th generation warfare. This isn't, whoever has the strongest army is going to win. No, now it's whoever has the strongest technological advances is going to win. You don't even know who your enemy is anymore. I could sit here, shake your hand today, and then have an assassin drone come facial ID scan and blow you up the next day. You wouldn't even know it was me. I could sit here and lie to your face all day long and have a robot go and kill you. You wouldn't even know it was me. So, I mean, but the whole basis is just a family structure to keep the teammates together. That's the whole point of all of this stuff of wives submitting to husbands and being silent in the churches and everything, is so that you don't give, you have an unquestioned leader, and so that way nobody can drive a wedge between you two. Because otherwise you're telling them what you believe, and they can be like, oh well, I'm a better choice for you because I believe what you believe, but I could be lying. And I would never trust somebody, and I never trust people that say stuff like that to me. If you're trying to convince me, that means you have some kind of ulterior motive. That's just how I view things. I shouldn't have to convince you to do anything. Because if I have to convince you, that means it's not real. But when you speak stuff into existence, when you let people know disagreements, you give them an opportunity to find a way to get some kind of emotional drive off of you. And emotional drives are temporary. So anything you do that is an emotional choice is a temporary thing. That's how people always end up 30 years down the road and they're like, man, I just don't know what's wrong with my life. I've got all of this stuff. I've got this great career. I've got this husband or whatever, and I don't feel happy. You don't feel happy because you reacted to everything your whole life. You didn't actually do anything that you truly sat down and said, this is what I want for the long term. That this is where I want to end up. You instead let other people influence you, making you think, oh, this is what I want. No, that's what you wanted emotionally in that time. And then you found out that wasn't actually what you wanted. And so now you've gotten yourself into a situation to where, oh, I emotionally made choices, and now I'm not happy with those choices because you made them in the moment. You didn't actually think them through, because you either live in the moment or you live in the long term. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of every religion, is continuity, as the concept of continuance. And so if you're not a religious person, people find that in other things. Like, for instance, like they might create like creator of Disney, for instance, like he made Disney. That was his whole life purpose. That he does good things and tries to keep his name good for Disney. And so that's leaving a legacy. So if you're not leaving a legacy, or you're not a religious person, and you're not trying to live a good life and make correct choices for the long term to better yourself, then you are living in the moment. And people who live in the moment, that's where you make mistakes that negatively affect your life, because you're not thinking about the consequences that come with every. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Any choice that you make has negative and positive consequences. It's not bad for me to say, if you did something to me, it's not bad for me to say, hey, I don't want to be with you anymore because you did this. But there will be negative consequences to it. For instance, if I told you I didn't want to be with you anymore, and we broke up again, and you left, and I feel sad about it, that's a negative consequence. But if I break up with you and I feel sad about it, that is a consequence of that, of my action. Was my action right or wrong? Doesn't matter. That's still one of the consequences of it. So everything you do has a consequence, whether it's negative or positive. So if you're not thinking in the long term of your consequences, and you're just living, you're just like, oh, well, this feels like a good choice right now, so let me do this, and you don't think about anything, the way that could affect you, negative and positively, well, then you're shooting yourself in the foot, because then you're going to end up having something happen to you, and you're going to be like, well, how did this happen? Well, let's backtrack a little here, So decide, if you decide like, oh, I want this new car, and you go buy this new car, and you're like, oh, well, I have a job and it's $10,000 and I can make payments on it. So then you go buy the car, and you didn't think long term on it. You're just like, oh, I want this car. I'm going to go buy it today. I have a job and I can make payments on it. So you go and do that, and then you lose your job, and then you can't make payments on it now. And then now you start spiraling down all of these things, which all led back to you purchasing a car and not thinking about what could have happened. You didn't prepare. You should have said, okay, I'm going to buy this car, but what happens if I lose my job and can't pay for it anymore? You didn't think about that because you just made an in-the-moment choice. You didn't think about the long term. You didn't think about the continuance of your actions. That's the whole purpose of religion, is thinking about the continuance, thinking about, even if it's, because when you get to the end of it and it's like you're judged by your actions of what you did, well, that's kind of the whole point, is that you're trying to think, okay, I need to make the best choices for me so that I'm judged good.
Mm-hmm.
So I've explained that better on better days, but I hope that one.
But no, I understand what you're saying.
I just went on for 34 minutes,
I
so
know.
that's that episode.
There's an episode right there.